Duval,
Present.
Mr. Vine, Mayor Benjamin.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Here.
All right.
Oh,
I know Mr.
I
Vine
apologize.
had a
Thank you,
court
Mr. Davis.
All right. I know Ms. Vine had a court obligation joining us post haste. So let's go ahead. Reverend McDowell, would you give us a word, brother?
Yes. Oh Lord, for all that you've done for us today, Lord, we ask that you might sensitize us to your will and to your way. Undergird us with your power and with your love. Allow this city to be fortified with goodness, justice for all. Lord, we ask it in your name. Amen.
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 The motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Discussion. Any previous question? Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickaman,
Yes.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. All right. The motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 6.
I move approval of the agenda items 1 through 6.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? All right. And then we'll move to the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickaman,
Yeah.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. Sorry, Teresa. I think I'm taking your job too.
You're okay. No problem. You're rocking and rolling. That's good. I did, Mr. Mayor. I was going to, as I think you would want me to, acknowledge a note that Chief Holbrook shared with his officers and reminding us all that in 1963, President Kennedy designated this week as National Police Week. And so I did want to acknowledge that, and that on Friday, May 15th, is actually Peace Officers Memorial Day, which I think will not be celebrated in Washington, D.C. this year due to the national COVID-19 pandemic in the way that it normally is. But you will see many of our officers on Friday wearing a badge, mourning band, to also acknowledge those lost in the line of duty or who have fallen in service to their communities. And so I did want to acknowledge that today. And I'm wearing my PD shirt, and I always have to wear a different staff shirt. So just wanted to share that. In addition, we are moving forward with our ordinances for first reading. Ordinance number, this is item 7, ordinance number 2020-026, authorizing the city manager to execute a lease agreement between the City of Columbia and 701 Whaley Olympia LLC for lease of a portion of the Wayne Street right-of-way adjacent to 701 Whaley Street in Richland County.
Is there a motion?
So move.
Mr. McDowell, second, Mr. Davis. Any discussion? Now we move to the previous clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickaman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. Thank you.
Item 8, ordinance number 2020-043, authorizing the city manager to execute a 13th amendment to the purchase agreement between the City of Columbia and Bright Myers 2001 LLC for the sale of approximately 5.97 acres, the Capital City Stadium in Richland County.
Is there a motion?
So move.
I move approval.
Second.
Move, Mr. McDowell, the second, Mr. Davis. Discussion, Mr. Rickman.
If we could get an update on where things are.
All right.
I know that they were waiting on this amendment specifically to be approved by you all, Mr. Rickman. We had given them the verbal acknowledgement. So my understanding is they're moving towards finalize anything else they need to do. I don't know if Missy or Krista want to add anything. Chris is on the line.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was just clear from them that those extra days or so were very crucial in solidifying their deal. Yeah, I think that was the only update that I received. And this does
Yeah,
contemplate that.
Put time frame on it, and for some reason pull up to see if we had changed or how that was moving forward.
The feedback I got, Daniel, was that those extra few couple of weeks were crucial to them getting their deal done, and the situation we're all in right now, so it was prudent to give them a little more time. Can't get it done in September, then we'll be in a different game.
Okay.
Move the question. Clerk call roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye.
Item 9, an ordinance for second reading, ordinance number 2020-025, consenting to the inclusion of property in a multi-county industrial business park, 604 Hughes LLC in Richland County.
All right. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Is there a second? Second. All right, discussion. We'll move the previous question. Oh,
Mr. Brennan,
No.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. All right.
Resolutions. Item 10, resolution number R 2020-053, authorizing the city manager to execute a First Amendment to a ground lease agreement between the City of Columbia and ASH Bickley Road LLC, 727 Harton Street.
Is there a motion?
So move.
A second.
Second.
Discussion. Move the previous question. Clerk call roll.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
sorry, Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if you want to hold item 11. I know Ms. Devine was moving that forward, or we can go ahead with it. Here,
Well, I
whichever
think
you think.
we're in support. Certainly, we can come back to it. Let's just make sure we do. I think there'd be broad support for it. Yeah, we can come back.
Yes, sir.
We can come back to it. Thank you.
we would ask that you open a public hearing, and at that time, we will have a presentation on the City of Columbia 5-year consolidated plan and fiscal year annual action plan. Ms. Gloria Said, our Community Development Director, is here to give that presentation. I think along with maybe our consultant may be involved as well from Civitas. I see them actually on the screen, so I'm assuming so. Mr. Mayor?
Cool. All right, let's do it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Gloria, will we have public input, or Erica? And you all let us know if any have called in or signed up.
Yes, we are ready to address any public input that may come through today.
Okay.
At this time, we do have callers on the line, but no one is in the speaker queue as it relates to this public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
So Ms. Wilson, you ready for me to get started?
Yes,
Hello?
ma'am. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Thank you, Mayor Benjamin and members of the City Council. We're excited to bring forward to the presentation today for the 5-year con plan. This is something that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development require that the city does every 5 years. The con plan will describe the jurisdiction's community development priorities and multi-year goals based on assessments of housing and community development needs and analysis of housing and economic market conditions and available resources. The city has engaged Civitas to assist us in completing this 5-year plan, as well as our annual action plan. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Eric Chatham, who is the principal for Civitas.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Gloria. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. I have a brief presentation to share with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. As you probably can see on your screen, where all of our tiles are minimized now, so I can't necessarily see, but please feel free to interrupt if you might have questions as I go through the presentation. As Ms. Said mentioned, the consolidated plan is a required document as a stipulation of the city receiving funds from HUD each year. HUD requires that at least every 5 years, the city sort of takes a pause in the HUD programs and reanalyzes the community needs. I will go over some highlights of our community input and our community analysis, as Ms. Gloria mentioned momentarily. The consolidated plan also includes our annual action plan, which I'm sure you're familiar with approving each year. The annual action plans include specifics about how funds will be allocated in this upcoming 2020 program year, and we'll share those details momentarily as well. So the consolidated plan includes 5 major components: the needs assessment, which looks at the needs of the citizens of Columbia; the housing market analysis, as it sounds, is a review of the housing market and the conditions within the community; the 5-year strategic plan, which sets up our priorities and goals for addressing those needs over the next 5-year period; the annual action plan; and then, of course, citizen participation. And we hosted a series of public meetings throughout the community, and I know many of our council members were able to attend some of the meetings in their jurisdictions. The chart on the right-hand side of your screen indicates the allocation amounts for 2020. The amount for each program is based on a formula from HUD, and then the program income anticipated for totals on the right-hand column for each program. I'll now highlight a bit of the eligible uses for each program as well. The Community Development Block Grant Program is the oldest HUD program and has the widest eligible uses. The city often uses those funds for things like public facility improvements, streets, sidewalks, parks, public facilities. City also uses some of those funds for housing and non-residential building improvements, as well as public services. And many of your outside agencies provide assistance to low and moderate income families throughout Columbia around healthcare, homeless services, youth and adult literacy, summer programs, and senior programs. And of course, some of the funds, up to 20% of the allocation each year, can be used for planning and administrative expenses incurred by the city. The Home Investment Partnership Program, commonly referred to as the HOME program, as it sounds, is primarily dedicated to providing affordable housing throughout the community. Affordable housing must be dedicated for households at or below 80% of the area median income. And the city often utilizes those funds to provide housing development subsidies for multifamily and single-family housing development. City has a home buyer assistance program, owner-occupied housing rehabilitation program, and in some cases offer a portion of those funds for rental assistance is eligible and may be a consideration moving forward. The third program that the city receives annually is referred to as the HOPWA program, or Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS and HIV. This is to provide rental assistance and supportive services for persons in the region that have HIV or AIDS. So based on community feedback, data collection, and conversations with staff for the 5-year period, we have developed on their left-hand column these priority needs: to expand and improve public infrastructure and facilities, preserve and develop affordable housing, provide for public services and quality of life improvements, provide for housing and supportive services for persons with HIV and AIDS, and provide for economic opportunities for residents and businesses within Columbia. And then on the right-hand side, you see specific goals for each of those priority needs. For our 2020 annual action plan, the table on your screen now displays the projects and the allocations for the CDBG program. As I mentioned, administration can be up to 20% of the allocation. Public facilities and infrastructure, we've listed 2 specific parks that will be addressed and are improved during the 2020 program year. Housing programs, these are ongoing housing programs that have long been operated by the city, including owner-occupied housing rehabilitation, maintenance assistance program, and then the city's city lender and down payment assistance loan program. Public services, which are often, again, your outside agencies providing supportive services for low to moderate income individuals and families, as well as supportive services for persons with special needs, for example, homeless, elderly, or disabled individuals. And finally, under economic development and the Office of Business Opportunities, we're offering funding for commercial redevelopment and job retention programs. On the home program, administration is capped at 10% of the annual allocation. CHODO reserves, the CHODO stands for Community Housing Development Organization. These are nonprofit affordable housing developers in the community, and the city is typically required to allocate at least 15% of the annual allocation for those eligible organizations. City will also continue to allocate part of the home funds for owner-occupied rehab. And where this differs from the CDBG program, you see here the home program provides for substantial rehabilitation, which might include a whole house renovation, where the CDBG program allows for minor repairs or more emergency repairs, and doesn't require that the entire house be rehabilitated. Home funds will also be allocated for the city lender program, and then all other affordable housing development programs, both rental and home ownership, is our last project there, non-CHODO development activities. For the HOPWA program, you could see that the city will allocate the maximum 3% for administration. And then we have listed the ongoing partners that provide HOPWA services for clients throughout the region with these funds. So a quick summary of our survey and community participation efforts. We had surveys open for both the community at large and stakeholder organizations. The surveys were available for almost 3 months, and we promoted them through a variety of means, city website, social media, and then as we made our community meetings around the city, we advertised and provided paper copies of the surveys. Unfortunately, we only received about 50 responses from the community at large, and you can see their primary responses or items that they identified as being most important. However, 33 responses from community organizations or stakeholders was a fairly strong response there. So from the stakeholders, creation of affordable housing and homebuyer assistance was the #1 priority in their minds, followed by public services, homeowner and renter housing rehabilitation, public facilities and infrastructure, and then finally economic development. A couple of the highlights from the data collection. Here's some highlights for the city demographics. I'll point out in the bottom left hand of your screen what I feel like is the most important data point that we've collected from from the consolidated plan. That's that 55% of the renters in the city of Columbia pay more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. In other words, they're considered housing cost burdened. When you have such a high rate of cost burdened renters, it becomes very difficult for that group of or that portion of the city's population to be able to have discretionary funding for any kind of other expenditures, whether that be recreation or food and medicine. And certainly with that high of renters being cost burdened, this limited their ability to advance to home ownership in the future. So I would tend to concur with the stakeholders that affordable rental housing development and preservation of existing affordable rental housing in the community has got to be one of the highest priorities. So as you're probably familiar, the HUD programs primarily benefit low to moderate income households. The map on the right-hand side of your screen indicates the low to moderate income areas throughout the city. And what this means is at least 51% of the people living in these areas are considered low to moderate income, meaning they have incomes at or below 80% of the area median. And the bottom left-hand side of your screen shows what, excuse me, what low to moderate income means in Columbia. So Columbia median income is $43,650. So 80% of that would be roughly $34,920. The HUD programs do adjust for household size. So those numbers will be lower for households of 1 or 2, but they'd be higher for households of 4, 5, or 6 or more. But this gives you a kind of a picture for the city as a whole. So our next steps, we are currently obviously presenting our public hearing, and we have conducted a 30-day public comment period, as you see, from April 3rd through May 4th. And we are looking for your approval, and then we will wrap up and conclude and summarize all of our feedback and be ready to submit the plan to HUD for approval on Friday. They then have a 45-day review period, and so we anticipate having approval and access to the funds around July 1st, which is when the city starts its program year. For residents that might be interested in reviewing the entire draft con plan, there's a link provided on the screen now for where they might access the full plan. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll reduce the sharing here.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions?
I think Mr. Davis has a question, Gloria.
I guess a general comment and maybe a question. So from what I can tell, this budget is kind of consistent with where we've been for the last few years. Not that high, and that has nothing to do with, I think, our requests and needs, but I guess federal dollars in general. But and we've been working on this. Y'all have been working on this for quite some time. You can almost say post pandemic. But are y'all getting any kind of signals now about where your dollars might, what it might look like? But I think any sizable cuts on what we get from this would really kind of keep us in the mud when it comes to addressing the housing needs, those that we classify affordable. So what are y'all hearing? I know in general we can expect cuts. That's not I know we're not going to get what we know we need, and obviously what we may request, but I think any sizable hit on this really will really hurt our goals. Anybody want to comment on that?
So, Councilman Davis, this is Gloria speaking. The amounts that we are showing on the presentation in terms of the HUD 2020 fund allocation, that's what the HUD has already allocated for the city to receive this year. Mm-hmm. If they're going to be, yeah, this is what we know the HUD says that we are going to receive for the year.
Okay. So.
And they're pretty consistent. The amount actually is a slight increase in what was allocated last year in 2019.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I've got a question, Ms. Wilson, when you get a chance.
I do too.
Go ahead, Will, and go ahead, Daniel. I'm sorry. What's up to sharing the screen? I can't see who's got the hand up. So
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
we can transition back to the screen. Thank you. All right.
Gloria and Mr. Chatham, quick question. The funding to administration percentage, does that go to city administration, or is there a third party that administers the use of these funds?
That is for city staff salaries in that particular instance. In the amounts that are awarded to subrecipients, in some cases they do request for admin costs, but what you see here is for city salaries.
And those percentages are pretty standard from the federal program throughout, correct?
Yes.
And then I guess my other question real quick. So we're getting these funds and they're specifically to go towards these, I guess, goals and priority needs. Are there specific plans as far as the funding coming to the city, how we allocate that? I know all local municipalities have different issues with affordable housing and separate solutions. So is it to our discretion to how we figure out how to use these funds most appropriately and effectively?
Yes, sir. We certainly, when we're looking at programs to recommend for funding, we definitely want to make sure that they are in alignment with the priorities and goals set forth in the consolidated plan. But yes, the city council does have the discretion to make specific requests and decisions on how to direct funds, as long as they are still in line with what's outlined in the comp plan.
Perfect. Great. Thank you for that.
Gloria, the projects that are presented in the presentation, though, are the recommended projects that we've come up with. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And if there's, I mean, they went through the committee process and review. Is there any clarification you want to give to that?
Yes, ma'am, certainly. As you know, each year we go through the NOFA process, where we actually hold meetings and put the funding available out for nonprofits or groups to apply for. We actually went through that process. It normally starts around the fall of each year. Those applications are reviewed and vetted for completeness. And then our Citizens Advisory Council, they actually assist in reviewing and making decisions or recommendations to council for approval.
Yeah, and just so, again, for folks who aren't used to hearing a lingo, NOFA process or notice of funds available, and we make that available for those who might solicit. It might be worthwhile at some point. This is, I know, first year. Well, every few years, depending on some identified needs or something that's really present and accounted for, staff responding to council's needs and desires, we'll take a long, strong look at our funding priorities and we'll restructure them. And we made some, we've changed some things year by year, of course, all consistent with the HUD guidelines. And some we made a long-term commitment that this is something we're going to have to kind of, an elephant we have to eat one bite at a time. So my sense is, just based on some of the articulated priorities you've had, is that some of them would squarely into some of these identified funding streams. So I think this kind of just I think spitballing with Gloria and her team, they got some great talent in that office, and saying, these are the things that are sticking out to me. You'll find, obviously, the plan that we're set to approve here, easily a number of your priorities will fall right into that. But I'm just thinking prospectively, if some things that kind of sticking out to you, lay them out to Teresa and the team, and you'll find that although it seems to be incredibly rigid sometimes, CDBG and HUD can actually be downright flexible at times to meet the needs that kind of exist in every American community. So I think that'd be worthwhile, Teresa. It's kind of walking through. I think we all kind of wind up in place normally, but I know Will's got some very specific ideas that might be worth illuminating and getting together with the staff on.
And the council's ability to help us connect the dots to Mr. Brennan, oftentimes with CDBG dollars, if it can be used for infrastructure, and if we've kind of been working in a targeted area, and maybe some ED dollars have gone in there, OBO dollars have gone in there. We have tried to be strategic in finishing projects and complementing projects when we're working in certain areas. So you'll see that too as you get, I guess, more adjusted and used to the funding streams. And as the mayor said, kind of the flexibility there sometimes that you may not think that CDBG dollars have. They actually can help us get things done and fill the gap because they have to be shovel-ready projects too, majority of the time. You'll hear us talk about timeliness, and we've met timeliness this year, and that's a goal we have to meet every year. So we try to get projects that are ready to go.
Great. Very informative. Thanks.
Mr. Rickman?
I think what this does, it really like what we've talked about previously and how it's very important that we move for some type of tax reform. If you look at that, the majority of the costs that are generated in that rent is from property tax, because every one of those rental units is considered investment property, which is taxed at the 6%, is continuing to be a burden community, which goes along with the studies that we're going to see. So this is just another reason why we need to look at the tax reform, looking at all the agencies and figuring out how we become competitive, because these same folks could go rent in Calhoun County, Newberry, Lexington, Sumter, Kershaw, and have a lot less rent and a bigger, now they have to commute for jobs. So I think we want to try to keep those folks in town, make it affordable, acceptable. This is one of those challenges. And I think, unfortunately, this highlights the disadvantage that the tax structure has put on our city. And so I hope as we move forward, we can get to a point where we can levelize the playing field.
I think you're absolutely right, Daniel. The disproportionate impact of these kind of macro issues on a city with our DNA, it's real, and we could significantly affect the burden that affects commercial property. And obviously, we've done our part as a city and holding the line on taxes and millage. I'm glad Mr. Palin's phone is muted. He would sigh as I say that, but we've done our part, and our city dollar, our city mill is a smaller and smaller percentage of a tax dollar that comes in, but it does require us to continue some of the efforts all of you have been leading on trying to make sure we're able to solidify revenue streams at the same time, not increasing burdens on commercial landlords and by virtue of that their residents. It's definitely very very real. I also might want to flag Gloria and your team and Eric, hearing a lot more talk again about Midlands Housing Trust Fund, about really trying to make sure we took a few shots at it before. I'm not sure if it ever got really off the ground the way we wanted it to here in the Midlands, but hearing a lot of discussion from a number of groups to try and make that happen again. So I'm sure we'll hear about that, but that's good. If there are no additional questions, Erica, do we have any citizens again who may have wanted to participate in the public hearing portion?
No, sir. There are up to 12 callers on the line, and no one is in the speaker queue.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. And Gloria, you do need action, right?
Yes, Mayor, we do need authorization to proceed with submitting the con plan and annual action plan to HUD by Friday.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion?
I so move, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion? Seeing none, if I can't see anyone, screen sharing. Move the previous question, clerk.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickerman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell? Mr. McDowell?
You're muted, Ed. All right, come on back to Ed. You're still. He bit a thumbs up. I'm not sure if that counts, Ed. You might have to come off mute. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye. Thank you very much, Gloria, Eric, Teresa. Thank y'all so much for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Gloria, don't go too far. We also have another presentation by Ms. Saeed, Mayor Benjamin, and Council as we move into a period of discussion on some COVID-19 related updates. Obviously, the federal government has allocated some funding through the CARES Act, and Ms. Saeed and her team, Ms. Gentry and others have begun reviewing the requirements and the allocation to the city. We're still a little early in being able to utilize these funds, but we did want to get council thinking about it and offering some clarifying points. So Gloria, if you could brief us on the CARES Act funding COVID-19 relief.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. In fact, this is a great segue, a follow-up to the presentation that was just given by Eric. But as all of you know, the city is in a position to receive additional funding for the CDBG CV CARES Act dollars. And we're going to give you a slight update on that today. Just keep talking. Okay. So, as you all know, the overall CARES Act, which was approved some weeks ago, covers CDBG development block grant dollars in the amount of $5 billion. And the city of Columbia was awarded through the first round, which consisted of $2 billion in CDBG CD funding. The city will receive $611,921 for that. And in addition to that, the HOPWA dollars have been awarded as well in the amount of $220,838. And so hopefully, yes, thank you. We should be receiving that letter very soon about those allocations, and we'll be prepared to move forward with our next steps. In terms of the COVID-19 CDBG CV CARES funding, there are certain uses for it. Whatever the funds are used for, they must address the coronavirus to either prevent, prepare for, or respond to the pandemic. Some examples of eligible uses include building and improvements, including public facilities, assistance to businesses, including special economic development assistance. In addition to that, it includes examples of assistance to businesses, as I mentioned, and also provisions of new and quantifiably increased public services. Other eligible uses include planning, capacity building, and technical assistance. Some of the programs that we are already funding in our regular CDBG programs that we've already mentioned assist the low to moderate populations, the most vulnerable populations already in terms of providing medical services, assistance for rental, assistance, food, share programs, and things of that nature. And so interestingly enough, there's always been a need for it, but now with the impact that the COVID-19 crisis has put in our community, there's going to be additional need to assist in those areas. So that is one of the things that we're going to ask that council continue to give us some feedback on in terms of how you believe, based on what you're hearing, some of those funds can be used for. In addition to the eligible uses of CDBG CV, we also are receiving HOPWA CV funds, and those are dollars that can also be used for housing payment assistance, specifically to assist those who are HIV and AIDS positive. So we do look for other opportunities to assist in those areas as well. So some of the ways that we want to find out, how we can assist individuals is to do as the OBO department did, where they completed a survey. We are also in the process of doing that so that we can get that out within the next week or two to get feedback from the citizens and our stakeholders as well. As we move forward in the preparation of what's going to be a substantial amendment, once HUD approves the con plan and the action plan, as we're going to submit on the 15th, we would like to, in the meantime, prepare information so that we can bring back to council to see those programs that we're going to be recommending through the substantial amendment. That is a process that we have to go through based on some of the information that has been provided thus far. I will say that we are continually getting additional information almost on a daily basis in terms of how to complete this process. But some of the things that HUD has done so far in providing additional provisions for a substantial amendment is they have extended the date to submit your con plan or action plan until August 16th. We're glad that we do not have to do that. I'm very proud to say that the staff has worked very hard to make sure that we were in line with what the original timelines were to submit our con plan and action plan. So we are going to do that. In the meantime, we have received additional guidelines on some of the things that will be suspended for the substantial amendment. One of those things includes a 15% cap on public services. So as you may be aware, in the past, we have funded public service providers, our recipients, with a maximum cap of 15%. And HUD has removed that cap specifically for COVID, which is going to be very helpful. Also, they reduced the 30-day public comment period down to a 5-day comment period. And they've also suspended in-person public hearings, depending on what the guidelines will be at the time we get to the point where we're ready to do that. I don't know if we'll be back to doing, public hearings where people can come and meet, or if we'll continue to do it virtually. But they have allowed for us to do that. Also, one of the things that HUD does not or has not waived at this point is fair housing, non-discrimination, labor standards, and the environmental requirements. Quite frankly, those are some of the things that they also held in place with our CDBG-DR as well as our CDBG mitigation funding. So that's pretty consistent. Having said that, we do have a proposed timeline as well to work in conjunction with our submittal of our regular con plan and annual action plan. As you can see, we have a deadline of May 15th to get that submitted. In the interim, we will prepare and conduct a survey to help determine needs and priorities for the CDBG CD funds and HOPWA funds. Our goal is to have that available by May 16th for public comments of feedback. And then by June 30th, our goal is to have the development programs completed for CDBG CD funding. And of course, within that time frame, we will work with Ms. Wilson and work with Ms. Gentry to get those plans back to you to get your feedback. Once that's done, we'll post a public notice to allow for the citizens' comments, submit the substantial amendment to HUD for CDBG CD, and that can take up to 45 days. We hope it won't take that long, but it can take that long. We would expect to hear back from them by August 30th, 2020, and that time be prepared to get those funds on the street. So I know that sounds like a long time, but there is a lot of work and different things that HUD does require, that the guidelines that we must meet in order to utilize these funding that they've made available. But I hope that information has been helpful to you. And if you have any questions at this time, please let us know.
Any questions? And that timeline is still the same, Gloria, even if you use funds for the very specific articulated purposes that they laid out regarding the guide.
So the timeline in terms of how soon you have to use it, or
I was talking about.
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question.
Yeah, well, for example, the CARES funding. One of the long list of specific uses. If we decide to use some of the CARES funding through HUD for supported isolation of those individuals who may have tested COVID positive and might not have the opportunity to isolate at home like many of us might have. Is that something we could just do, or is that something we need any or is that just for the point that we're submitting on Friday?
So that is something, if it's going to prevent, prepare, or respond to, we're going to have to make sure whatever we propose, we can tie back to the coronavirus pandemic itself. So that is a potential viable activity to fund. And that's more of what we'd like to hear from you too. If there's anything that you believe would be beneficial to the public in terms of funding, we'd like to know what those things are so that we can do our vetting to make sure that it's going to meet the requirements that's set forth for the program.
But Gloria, it's not considered reimbursed. I guess what the mayor's asking, are we able to go ahead and go down that path and implement something in that regard before you would have submitted your substantial amendment for approval in July? And still expect to be reimbursed, so to speak, or have it, be able to apply the funding towards it.
Okay. So let me double check on that. I don't want to say yes and then there's an issue. So let me double check on that to make sure, because a lot of what we do is reimbursable. The key is, though, in the event that is allowable, that the individuals have adequate documentation and things of that nature in place in order for it to be reimbursable. So let me double check on that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
And that was just thinking about the reality that some of these responses that we're going to have to make, we're obviously going to have to, plan, execute, and see if we've succeeded or failed long before August. So just trying to determine exactly, how much latitude, what the possibilities are. So
yes,
that's a good question.
Yes, sir.
Thank
you. We'll answer on that for you,
Mr. Mayor.
Madam.
Yes, Ms. Said, if you would, that very last page, referencing survey, the time parameters included in that survey. What are the time parameters?
So our goal is to have that survey posted by the date shown, which is the 26th. The 26th of May, and we will anticipate, I would imagine, leaving the survey posted for about 5 days so that we can get that information back and get it analyzed so we can determine what, project to propose for funding.
Does that give us enough / ample time to get that data in? Because I think it's on May 26th, right?
Yes, sir. That's what.
I'm sorry.
That is the date we're projecting, but I'm listening to your thoughts on that in terms of whether you feel that's enough time.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I don't know whether or not it may be enough time to get that done, but I think to get a real good picture of how that's going to run its course, we may want to look at a few more days, Gloria. We got 5 days for that, and then June 30th, of course, for the developed programs for CDBG. I'm just questioning the wisdom of why 5 days and not 10 days or perhaps more.
Well, one of the reasons is that, you know, time is of the essence. We do anticipate having the approval from HUD on our regular con plan and annual action plan by July 1st. And we want to make sure that by that time we have done the survey and we have activities to recommend through a substantial amendment so that we can continue moving forward. Now, one of the things that we can do to ensure that we notify the public is we can work with our public information office. We can send information out to our neighborhood associations. We can make sure that we give ample notice to our stakeholders and others to make sure we can get feedback, even though it'll be for 5 days. I think when the OBO did theirs, they got a lot of feedback in a short period of time because of a lot of the advance notice that they put out. And we'd like to be very aggressive in that area as well so that we can let folks know that the survey is available and we can encourage their input.
Sure. Well, I just wanted to make sure that we'd have enough time for that information to be ascertained so that come July, we are ready. I mean, I'm comfortable with that, but I'm also comfortable with the notion that making sure communities and those persons who will participate in the survey are adequately informed and, of course, able to conduct information survey. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. We appreciate that, and we'll actually look at that. And so if we can leave it out for longer than 5 days and make it 10 days, Councilman McDowell, we will certainly, I think we can make that happen. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thanks. Any more questions for Ms. Saeed? All right, good deal.
Thank you, Gloria.
Yes,
Thanks,
ma'am.
Gloria.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, our next COVID-related discussion item is one that council had raised based off some feedback I know you all are getting in the public, as well as our observations through staff. And so ACM Simons, Assistant City Manager for Operations, is going to discuss with you some soft changes that we are proposing as guidelines for greenways and open spaces. This item will be followed by an emergency ordinance, which actually extends the ordinance that you had already passed in relation to park facilities. And so I'll let him explain all of that. We are not at this time proposing to make any changes to the closure of our parks facilities. It's my recommendation that they remain closed at this time. And during this discussion, if we could also take up some of the questions that I think you all have regarding tennis courts and the Drew Gym, and I think there may have been one other item raised about pools. I will tell you straight up before Henry talks, I'm not at the point to make a recommendation to you all to open any of those facilities. If any tennis courts have been open, they shouldn't have been at this point because the facilities are closed per your ordinance, but we are certainly wanting to get some feedback and direction from you. But as I'll continue to say, with some additional discussions we'll have in executive session, my theme with the staff is sustaining a healthy workforce, and I can get into that more. But as the governor's orders are implemented, and I understand the need for that as it relates to commerce and the market and businesses, the city is a public service delivery agency. And our biggest ability to do that, it turns on the health of our staff, our human capital. And so I really am not pushing back in any way to the public and their desire for recreation, et cetera. But at the same time, there has to be a balance of what is absolutely necessary and when. And we are making lots of preparations. Our preparedness level for reopening is well in it, underway. And I'll be happy to talk to you all about that in detail as well. But at the same time, I think we've done a good job of maintaining the health of our staff with some numbers that I've shared with you all. And the ability to do that still turns on bringing them back in a phased approach that keeps them healthy, and our frontline staff dealing with certain things that are not as necessary yet is part of the decision making for me. Obviously, I will take direction from you, but it's also a consistency thing because there are other sports other than tennis. There's basketball, there's baseball, there's many sports, and we tried to be consistent. Every community has something that they're excited about wanting to do. I get it, but until we're there, we're not there to do it consistently. That's my position. Happy to talk about it because I understand that there may be desires that you're hearing in the community, which is why we have tried to be flexible this entire time about green spaces. We have never enforced, even though they were closed technically. We've always had a soft enforcement. I'm gonna let Henry talk now. Sorry, Henry, for taking over the top of your presentation, but I'm gonna let him get into more detail about that and the reasons why we would recommend that you extend the closure of park facilities.
So can you hear me, Ms. Wilson? Can y'all hear me?
I can, yes, sir.
Okay, good. So thank you so much, Ms. Wilson, for your opening comments, and thank Mayor Benjamin and our city council for providing us with an opportunity to discuss and provide some guidance regarding our green spaces and open spaces. Of course, as you well know, our parks, as Ms. Wilson indicated, our parks and park facilities and amenities remain closed at this time. This is inclusive of our outdoor athletic courts, our fields, indoor gyms, dog parks, skate parks, bicycle pump tracks, playgrounds, restrooms, shelters, and pools remain closed. And of course, this decision was made out of abundance of caution to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and to protect our team members as well as our citizens. However, we would like to encourage our citizens to utilize our greenways and of course, open spaces for walking, jogging, and exercise. With this, I think it's important to note, we're asking our citizens not to engage in any other athletic activities or sports on the greenways as well as our open spaces. We desire for our citizens to enjoy, of course, the greenways and open spaces safely, and would ask that they follow this guidance. First and foremost, we're asking our citizens to avoid gatherings of 3 or more at all times. We do understand that there are maybe families together with more than 3 people, and we want to be sensitive to that. We have been. We're also asking that social distancing be utilized, keeping that 6 feet distance apart from each other. I think that's important, of course, especially when someone approaches you on a greenway or a path. We want to allow groups of citizens to pass one at a time. We would prefer citizens to utilize our greenways and open spaces early in the morning or late in the day if possible, so we can manage that traffic. We're also asking our citizens to follow the CDC guidelines regarding personal hygiene. More importantly, if a citizen is exhibiting symptoms, do not visit our greenways or open spaces. Of course, as a reminder, people with COVID-19 may not exhibit symptoms, so it is important to practice all the above mentioned guidelines, even if you are feeling well. So with those comments, I will yield it back to Ms. Wilson for additional discussion.
I'm just interested in hearing from the council on this issue as well as some of the others I raised.
No, Mr. Davis, then Mr. Rickman, then Ms. Devine. Mr. Davis, you can't hear you, Sam. Still can't hear you. You can take yourself off mute, or if you're using your phone, make sure we can hear you. There you go.
Just for clarification, there are some parks near neighborhoods, but they have the walking trails. Are the walking trails around parks included in this, Henry?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
You cannot use the walking trails around the parks.
No, you can. If there, you can use it. That's correct.
Okay, all right. As long as they don't go inside the buildings and collectively, like especially young people using the play areas and equipment. Is that correct?
That's correct. As long as they're practicing social distancing, they can utilize those trails. Correct.
All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rickman.
Yeah, Henry, I just wanted, and Ms. Wilson, I just wanted to get a little more insight. I'm a little confused about the tennis courts. Staff doesn't man those. There's social distancing for the most part. I know several other places. Casey, I was driving through there yesterday. We're utilizing it. They've got the social distancing signs on it. There's just a real demand for folks to get out, especially, we're in day 60 something now. So I'm just curious. I don't understand the why that's different than an open space or a walking trail. You're not, it's for the most part, a one-on-one sport, but even if it was doubles, they still are pretty distance apart. And no staff is exposed, so I'd like us to reconsider that.
Well, our staff is manning those facilities that have tennis courts. So again, we're here to hear what y'all's direction is. I think it would be inconsistent. As you know, Greenview Park, for example, has a very, very active tennis community. If it's time to bring back more staff, you're saying just for tennis, but the facility is closed. The Columbia Tennis Center, yes, our staff helps to maintain that facility. And I want to speak for Henry, so I'll let him, I don't know if Randy's on the phone, talk about that further as far as the capacity to maintain cleanliness and enforce social distancing. Yes, tennis is a sport that's different from the contact of basketball or baseball, but what I never want to do is put you all in the position of picking and choosing what's meaningful to our public who finds different things that are meaningful to them. But just as you all are hearing about tennis, there's a segment of our community where we hear a lot about basketball or just the playground equipment being utilized or whatever it might be. So I just think we have to be careful when we go down that path. And I think it's a slippery slope. Personally, I don't recommend it yet. Again, I'm asking for your feedback. Henry, do you want to clarify the facilities and the tennis?
No, you're absolutely correct. With the Columbia Tennis Center, we have staff that man that, and they're not working there anymore, so that's locked. Greenview, the Columbia Tennis Center and the Greenview space are very active, and there's a lot of people that normally utilize those tennis centers. So we do have staff that man those. So you're spot on with your comments. I think the main thing I'm concerned with is consistency. I don't want to, just like Ms. Wilson said, I don't want us to pick and choose. I think we need to be consistent across the board in terms of what we allow folks to play.
Yeah, I appreciate both Henry and Teresa's input and Daniel and Sam's questions too. And obviously they're trying to walk the proper line of making recommendations to us and not policy making, which is our responsibility. We've been fairly clear from the beginning that there were certain things that we would look for, and we led from the front, even if we didn't agree on all points. We're in an odd place, obviously, right now at the end of a shutdown, a relative shutdown, in that we have a number of our citizens who are eager to return to as close to life as normal as possible. We would have hoped that would have been not just after a period of social distancing, but also that some of the predicate steps that were articulated, I'm sure, again, by Dr. Fauci and others today, would have happened to help us get there. Everything from a deceleration of cases, probably foremost among them, So we're at an odd point where we're not there in terms of those articulated steps by public health officials. We've seen maybe some good data in some other areas. So I don't want to diminish those. But we acted and we've continued to act in the interest of the people of Columbia. So I think we want to be very careful to not be even swayed. And I'm not just pointing out Casey, Daniel. I'm just thinking about other communities. They're all over. I mean, whether it's Georgia or across South Carolina, even places up north, who are making different steps based on different metrics. It would be awesome if we all had one metric to rely on, but we just don't. And now we're kind of operating not even as 50 states, but as a few hundred different individual communities trying to make sure we're doing the very best by all communities. We're going to have to. I know staff has done a great deal of work, and Teresa, I'm not sure how much we've talked about that or broadly shared it about how we prepare our staff to return at the appropriate time in some of the literal construction work that you've been engaging in and preparing logistically for that. But we're going to have to, in the absence of some formal, consistent standards, because while we pay attention, that we've encouraged by our votes and encouraged citizens to follow CDC guidelines and to do certain things, and our businesses to do certain things. That's not necessarily the case with our surrounding jurisdictions or other jurisdictions across the state. So we're going to have to make the determination as to whether or not we're going to be consistent with our articulated values and principles and priorities and steps we've taken, or if we're going to try to be consistent with everyone else. And I think I prefer the former, not the latter. I think we got to keep our eyes trained on public health. It's going to be curious to see exactly how the actions over the last couple of weeks are going to overall affect our public health. I would be less than honest if I didn't say I'm greatly concerned. But I think we got some territory to cover, and I'd rather defer on the side of being right than being popular and being overly cautious than not being cautious enough. But obviously that's why we have good, strong democratic discussion and debate. And I think I cut you off. I think you're supposed to go third, Ms. Devine. So Ms. Devine, then I think I saw Mr. Brennan might have wanted to say something. Ms. Devine, Brennan.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, everybody. Just a couple things. I guess the question I have really is about enforcement, because I think that we are going to see even more of confusion considering the governor's order and his discussion of opening, pools and green space and other things. And so I would like to hear from Ms. Wilson and Mr. Simons on kind of what does that mean as far, and even Chief Holbrook, what does that mean, I guess, as far as our staff and putting them in a position to enforce, and certainly making sure that we are protected. We've seen, thank goodness not here in South Carolina, but we've seen in other areas where people have tried to enforce things as small as social distancing or masks, where, it has put people in harm's way. So I would like to hear that, but just a couple points, I guess. I think before today, I was kind of thinking the same thing as Councilman Rickman on the tennis, because I do feel like in that sport is kind of leads itself to help social distance, but being reminded, as Ms. Wilson said, thinking about all of our facilities and making sure we're consistent. My experience is more so, and our tennis courts are more so with Greenview and over here at Earlwood. You could be at Earlwood and you may or may not see anybody on the tennis courts for a few days, and when there is somebody, it's just someone playing singles or doubles, and that's it. You could be at Greenview and you have a lot of people waiting to get to the various courts there, and it really has become a gathering spot. And so I would be very concerned that if we say we're opening up and it's across the board, you may have some places where it's very hard to enforce social distancing. And I think that we need to be consistent. The other thing, baseball, over here in Earlwood, again, you had some folks playing baseball yesterday, and I was talking to someone and they said, well, you can social distance because everybody's all out in the field and they're not together, but it's still, there's a lot of people congregating at baseball. So I think that it's going to be a slippery slope if we don't have a very strong and clear, consistent message where we are. Especially even in the green spaces, you have lots of folks, you can see at other places that people are going out and they're congregating in the green space. So I think we've got to be very careful as we ease back in. We know people are eager, and I think that if we can maybe have that consistent message and then continue to back up whatever our position is with the data and explain rationally why these are concerns, I think that people will understand. But I would like y'all to address the enforcement, because I'm very concerned with any and everything that we open up. Where are we and where are our staff when it comes to enforcing these, even when it's, someone who might seem like I'm just out trying to have fun. But if we meet with somebody who is a little bit pushing back on our regulations, how is staff going to be enforcing those things?
Yes, ma'am. I'll let Henry answer for the most part. I mean, part of the position that I guess I gave you has something to do with that too, until it becomes absolutely necessary to just have, a widespread opening for all of these different amenities and sports. I just don't think we're there yet. And I think it allows us the ability to ease back into staffing, ease back into doing it slowly but surely. And again, the mayor spoke about the overarching community and the opening up of the marketplace and all of that. My parameters of control are the city of Columbia and its employees and our functions. And so, and we can't control everything every employee does, but when I begin to expose them and integrate them back at a time where there's still some unknowns, I think those interactions you just described, Ms. Devine, potentially have the consequences that then when people aren't thinking about it now, but when water's not clean and the trash isn't picked up and all these other functions that city government provides, and we can't provide it because we have a workforce that is potentially sick. And I'm not saying that's going to happen that way, but I have to think about the different repercussions for when and how we do things. So that exact sample you gave of how we enforce, we're enforcing because we would have to, because we've opened up things en masse. If we can ease our way into things and do it in a measured way, that allows us not to have as much capacity for that type of enforcement. We've been enforcing softly the greenways all along. You all passed this ordinance at the very beginning of all of this, and we still allow people to be on the greenways. And I really honestly hadn't heard a whole lot about it. Our park rangers are very good and adept at guiding people and being, nice and kind, but firm. And that is the directive that we will still give them. It's just that now I think Mr. Brennan had brought to my attention, there was, I guess with the governor's orders, certainly we needed to be more clear about, okay, yes, the greenways are actually open. You can use them, but these guidelines that Henry just gave you are what we want you to follow. And many other communities across the country have done things very similar to that. I think you shared what Raleigh did, very similar language. But our rangers will be out there still enforcing. PDs out there, they're monitoring. The only issue that we've had really has been the Saluda River Greenway, and I'll let Henry speak to that. And that technically is not in our jurisdiction yet. There's still some issues with the county and sort of getting some things done before it's handed over to us. There have been some issues there on the waterway side and people congregating, but that's technically not in our jurisdiction yet, but we've even been watching that. So I think Riverfront Park, the other major greenways, Earlwood, green spaces, people have been very receptive when asked to socially distance. That's the feedback I've gotten from staff. Henry?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, I go back to when we first started this with Riverfront. I mean, we had some challenges the first 2 weekends, and Chief Holbrook and his team had to get involved. But since then, we actually removed some of the furniture, or all of the furniture, from Riverfront Park. So what we have been seeing since then is walking, jogging. We had some families that would be together, that may be 3 or more, but for the most part, they've been compliant with what we have been asking. Has been concerned, I don't know if Chief Holbrook is on the line if you want to speak on this, but there has been some concern about the Three Rivers Greenway that Ms. Wilson just indicated. There's been a lot of activity on the weekend, and that location is not officially open and it's not transitioned over to the city. But on Kent Lane, which is adjacent to that greenway, there's been a lot of activity. So that's been a concern, and I know that Chief Holbrook has been monitoring that as well. But for the most part, Ms. Wilson, you're correct. We have our citizens have been compliant with what we've been asking, and if they continue to follow these guidelines, I think we can move slowly back into some type of norm at some point.
All right, Mr. Brennan.
Just to, I guess, piggyback on Councilwoman Devine. I mean, I appreciate first and foremost our dedication to our Parks and Rec and all of our staff's health as we move forward and start getting back to work slowly and thoughtfully. This, I guess, we have been truly enforcing a soft enforcement approach to a lot of our parks outlets. I view this as that clear message of this is what is open now. There's no questions anymore. There's no more soft enforcement. So I'm asking that question as well. What does enforcement look like if there's somebody using the bike pump track at Owens Field? What does it look like if there's kids playing basketball? What is the message that obviously common sense approach, which CPD's been doing a wonderful job of, but I just would like to have some description of what's next when it comes to the enforcement of our fields, our dog parks, and places like that.
So the idea would be, we know that the actual pump track that you're referencing at Owens Field is not necessarily even open yet. I mean, we just finished constructing that. So, and I know that there's been some activity out there, Councilman Brennan, and what we're gonna have to do is be more intentional about signage and maybe blocking that off some. And that just gives an example of how our citizens do want to enjoy our parks. They do want to be in our green spaces, but in kind of an abundance of caution, we have to take some additional measures to make sure that we close that off a little bit more, to make sure that we can appropriately enforce what our expectations are.
Great answer, Henry. Thank you, sir.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I vote for consistency. And of course, and I think all of us know this is just repeated verbiage we've all heard. Green space, fine. I think if we consider the other sports, whether it's soccer, whether it's football, whether it's tag football, I think we need to be consistent. This is dangerous. And I think to do anything other than stay in the course would be deadly for all of us, and not individually. I guess I can say individually and collectively. We are in a vista where there is danger everywhere. Now, say what you will of me, I don't play any of those sports, but I do walk. And I think that is something that is very valuable in the life of all of our residents. I think it becomes an issue of how we enforce it. Gee whiz, in order to enforce something, you got to have something there. We've taken out basketball, we've taken out the other activities, we've closed parks. let's be consistent in our understanding of what this virus means to each one of us individually and collectively. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. So, Teresa, what I'd recommend, and I'd say a couple of maybe quick thoughts, just observations. You know, enforcing things that we shouldn't have to enforce ought not be our Parks and Recs staff's responsibility. It should be to serve and to minister to the needs of our citizens when actively using these park spaces. Just as I articulated at our economic recovery task force meeting last week, I don't think it should be the fire marshals or police officers' jobs to handle the spacing of individuals on the outsides of restaurants or businesses. Obviously, doing our very best to make sure we help with social distancing, but we want to make sure we keep our staff safe and healthy. At the very same time, make sure that those who are working as essential employees are being used to the very high and best use that they possibly can. I do believe that a couple of points made is that we got to make sure that, particularly with all these different messages out there, that we continue to be very clear. We're being consistent, but we got to make sure it's clear. So what are the rules? And making sure those are articulated broadly. If it's leadership, putting them out very regularly, or some signage or what have you, what the rules and expectations are. And obviously, if we see some type of egregious flouting of those rules, then be prepared to respond in however we need to. Keep an eyes on the issues of equity and consistency citywide, making sure that obviously someone not social distancing is not a criminal offense. We're trying to maintain public health, so we're not in the business of penalizing people for recreating. That's not who we are. Now, when we get Candy Lane like that, we're going to have a whole lot more out there. In the meantime, we're going to have to work with the sheriff and the county and others in ensuring that folks who are participating on the ward over there are being careful. I do worry about public safety concerns out there. It's been separate apart from social distancing concerns. I also want to dispel the notion that even though we might have more physical sports, every sport, while you may be physically separate, there's still a lot of sharing of equipment and even touching balls. I mean, the ability to pass this or spread this is still very real, regardless of the sport. Seemingly be a little less menacing. Gotta get clarity, and we are going to have to, again, with the lack of consistency, even sometimes the CDC having goals that the president might not support, and how that matriculates its way down into local governments and state government. We are going to have to, based on our staff giving us very good feedback on what we're seeing other places, locally, as well as maybe other peer cities across the Southeast, giving us some guidance as to what those markers are, maybe very much the same markers that we're looking at as to how we phase our employees back in, as to how we might, again, continue to meet the overall citizen needs. It's tough because usually we often have the luxury of having some type of federal guidance or state guidance, that's some type of consistent guidance. And to some degree, a lot of us are on our own right now. I'm happy with the path we've taken. I think we owe the citizens clarity and constant conversation and constantly listening, and we'll find some opportunities to diverge from the path here or there. It has to be in this form of conversation and communication. But right now, I'm not comfortable with the data we're seeing across the region or even national, statewide, and want to see some more before we change course. But we are going to need some additional direction from you and Henry and others as to kind of, if we start seeing some opportunities to loosen the faucet a little bit.
You know how to fix mommy some tea?
All right, we can hear you. I'm not making tea. Okay. The Mr. Rickenman and then Ms. Devine.
I think it'd be helpful for us to understand what those points would be and how we would stage something out. I mean, I hear a lot of discussion constantly about numbers and this and that, but the reality is that the recovery rates are higher. Hospitalizations are not near where they were. Our numbers on a daily basis have not increased. They're still hovering at 1,400 active cases across the state. Actually, the recovery rates are increased by 10% since last week in the numbers. And if you look at the chart that's been provided to us, I mean, we're obviously going to see some more cases, but in the overall general, South Carolina is a little different place than New York or some of the other places. So I think as we move forward, we need to have a plan. Well, what stage, what number, what this is going to be a difference. It's not going to stop, unfortunately, because there's not a cure for it. Forever either. So how do we take that balance? When do we allow, a tennis to go on? And I understand your point about cleaning up and this and that, but I have to say we've been able to work very well with a lot of the frontline employees as well now and protect them, and we ought to afford the same protection to them. But I want to understand a plan. I want to know what points allow things to happen, because right now it's just, well, we're waiting on this, we're waiting on that, but there's no plan, there's no points, there's no, what is that point? When is it? And so I have to tell you, I mean, for the most part, I haven't had anybody call me about playground equipment or anything, but for some reason, tennis is a hot thing. And I think it's just they need to get out and they walk themselves to death. They rode their bikes to death. I think we're looking at it, but if we're going to stay this course, what is the next step? What allows that next step to be released? And we need to talk about that. We keep using the word, we need data or we need this, but to be honest, we're getting all that. What is that number? We just don't have a cure yet.
Two quick points, and then I'm sorry, Ms. Devine, I'll let you go. As relates to tennis, there may be some valid points there. I don't know. I'd be curious if maybe you look at, see what the USTA or some other organization might be recommending. Are they playing? And if they're not playing, is it because they can't pull in the crowds, or is it because of the issues on the court? If they're not concerned with issues on the court, and maybe it's more issues in the crowd, there just might be something to follow there that might be useful, and may also apply to other sports. Golf versus basketball. Just give us some guidance there. Each of those is not the same, and I think it might be able to address Mr. Rickman's concern, and we can be.
Well, I'm just passing on the constituents. Let me.
I understand. Well, Mr. Rickman's constituents' concerns. The second part is, I understand it, and obviously we can go. We could spend all day talking about data and statistics. The one piece of data that I'd hoped that we'd all be able to count on was always going to be a 14-day deceleration in cases. We're not going to see that. Okay, we're not going to see it just by the way that we've handled things as a state and as a country. We're just not going to see it. So, and obviously now that we're having moderate reopenings, we have to start determining, what will the other standards be? And we can look at infections and recoveries and everything else, and we'll say, hospitalization numbers are down. And I'll tell you that the state epidemiologist says there are 9 cases for everyone we don't know. And that Richland County is the first one to hit 1,000 known cases, regardless of how many have recovered, because we still don't know if recovery and having antibodies means you can't be reinfected. So we're kind of all over the place, and we don't want to do that dance. But we do need to, as things continue to evolve, find some type of standard that we're going to rely on. And I don't think anyone has the magic answer here, but it's something that we have to constantly kind of keep iterating on, because obviously we recognize that at some point, whether we like it or not, we're going to have to at least make some recommendations to our citizens as we did last week, and we'll continue doing that. But we're all learning as we go. Ms. Devine, then Mr. Rickon.
I would just say, even while we were here, I think Erica sent us an email from a comment a constituent put on there about basketball at Hyde Park. I know, I think I passed on to Randy early on. I had gotten a concern about basketball either at Drew or maybe St. Anna's. I don't remember, but I would say, Ms. Wilson, we need to make sure that as far as enforcement goes, and it needs to be what you guys talked about, not being the recreation police, but, making sure that we're reminding people. And so we need to have maybe a system of monitoring the different areas so that we can remind people, because I think part of that, and that's not necessarily our fault, but that part of that is mixed messaging. If someone drives by a park and they see people playing, and they're like, oh, I can, and then they hear what the governor says, they're like, I can go do that. And then we've got more and more people heading out to the park. So just food for thought. We need a system on how we're going to monitor so that we can enforce. And then I would just say, I guess, brief comment to the mayor and Councilman Rickman. We do need a plan, and I think it's hard to say. I mean, I think we have data, but the reality is people view the data in different ways. And I think a lot of people view the data and allow it to support the narrative that they want. And so from us, I think we've been very good from day one to be very thoughtful and do things together for the ultimate safety of our citizens. What I just really don't want to do is I see it every day on social media and some of the interactions and comments I have from people I comment with. There's a vast there's a huge division with the way people see the data. The same data, some people see it as a good thing, and we're never going to be rid of it. We just got to get out there and we stop being scared. And then others are like, I'm not scared, but I want to be safe, and I want to make sure that I'm doing things that keep me and my community safe. And so I think with knowing that we have those different thought processes out there from us, we need to be very objective and have a plan, but the plan needs to be based on recognizing that we may never be rid of it, as Councilman Rickman said, and there's not a cure, et cetera, but we also can do things that allows people the opportunity to and the information to make the right decisions. And when it comes to our public spaces or places that we can help at least encourage people to make very conscious, thoughtful decisions about how they interact with each other, I think we need to be able to do that.
I think those some good points, and a couple things that I want to make sure we talk about. We talk a lot about the federal government and the governor, but the reality is we have a lot of citizens that are disregarding everything and creating havoc, and they need to take some responsibility for what's going on, and we can't just shift it to different government entities. Secondly, I think that you're right. We do have to be very careful on how we move forward. I think we've done a lot of great things and other things, but at some point we do have to try to move this forward. And I think one of the disservices that keeps coming on, and it's creating another underlying problem, is that the news media especially is flashing big numbers and all the time, but never talking about recovery rates or anything else, which has caused a real problem in the medical community. We got doctors who aren't working. We got people who are not getting procedures, who aren't taking care of their checkups and everything else that's going to make them much more vulnerable to this type of virus and others, because we keep scaring everybody to get out of it. So I think we got to be careful in the messaging, but also got to be careful about numbers and how we push forward. So, I mean, I think it's a combination of both. You got to have the safety, but we also have the reality of that we have to start moving forward at a pace that makes sense. And not every area is going to be the same. We are in the same ocean, but we are not in the same boat. And we have to look at it that way. And just a side note, Governor Cuomo has just opened up tennis courts. No doubles though.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, I think we're gonna put a bow on that unless someone else had contribute. Mr. McDowell, get the last word.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to say a word of thanks to Henry. Henry, thank you for at least getting us to this point of this conversation. I understand that there is a tremendous need for a comprehensive plan. And I appreciate you at least getting us started with those particular points that you emailed out to us. So I think with more discussion and with more conversation, I think it would be to our best advantage to hold the fort. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Looks like Henry's had a haircut too. I'm not sure about that, but we'll talk about that later.
Thank you, Henry.
Everybody's doing different things right now, Mr. Mayor, so I don't know.
I am ready.
Have a conversation.
We're all trying our best, me included.
Mr. Rickman, I can come give you a cut. I'm learning.
The times you open up fast.
Take a pass on that one, Daniel. Take a pass on that.
I need one.
You can do a lot of good things, a lot of things well. I'm not sure I kind of cut the hair, but we'll see.
Nah.
All right. All right. Let's keep it moving. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Henry. And
Thank you, Henry.
and the accompanying ordinance
Thank
to
you, Henry.
discussion is the emergency ordinance that you all have already passed. It just needs to be extended. Ordinance number 2024-48, emergency order to extend the temporary closing of all public facilities to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our residents and visitors. Again, the change here would be the guidelines for greenways and open spaces that we will widely communicate, Mr. Mayor and Council, that they are open. We'll be specific about what that means, what locations those are, and sharing the guidelines of what we would encourage the public to do as far as socially distancing themselves.
And the time frame on this one, Teresa?
Teresa Knox, usually well, the other one ran for, I want to say 60 days like the others. I'm not sure what time.
So
I mean,
I think it's.
I don't know that it needs to go that long this time.
I wouldn't change a thing. My thought would be just consistent with the total conversation and the points raised by Daniel and others. Is that we always take leave to revisit the situation. And we've got to continue to look at, determine what standards, I'm saying data, what standards we're going to use to determine when and how to move forward. And I think I want y'all to continue doing just as you've done on city staff reopening, planning and iterating, and just come back to us and let's revisit this before the ordinance expires.
Yes, sir. Teresa Knox, do you have an answer to that question, though? I'm not seeing it here.
It's 60 days.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I move approval.
Second.
All right. Move second. Discussion, Mr. Rickman.
Yeah, how are we going to get the message out so people understand that the open spaces and the green spaces will be open and how of that, because they're just going to see this and not understand that. How is that going to be done to make sure that that's clear?
Starting as soon as today, I believe, Henry, but definitely tomorrow, we have a campaign to let them know that. Henry?
That's correct. I'll be working with Alicia on starting that process. That's correct.
Will you share that with each council member for us to share as well, please?
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is this so would we call this a order since changing it?
This is extension emergency order, and then a direction again to staff to broadly and clearly articulate kind of the rules here. All right, no more discussion. Let's move to the previous question.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Line,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council, for that discussion. That was helpful to us. Another area where we'll need some direction is regarding our budget that we are proposing for fiscal year 2020, 2021. Really tried to move this budget schedule forward a little bit quicker than what we previously discussed with you. So presenting the budget today with a public hearing coming probably sooner than we had last talked about, being that the budget is what it is. We are still a little bit at a loss with revenue projections. We've done our very best. But with that said, we had to make some significant cuts and went ahead and proposed those to you just to give a little more time for us to get direction from you for any changes, knowing that the likelihood of bringing back amendments after June 30th is probably something that we'll definitely have to do. With that said, Ms. Missy Kaufman, Budget and Program Management Director, will take you through a PowerPoint. It's in line with the materials you already received, the memo. I know that Council has discussed some changes, maybe some of our recommendations regarding hospitality tax in particular, and we were expecting that. I'd never, with H-tax, take a lot of liberties when it comes to some of the allocations for the line item groups, and obviously we've already had discussions with the committee that there would probably not be a process this year. So we made some cuts to the best of our ability across the board, knowing that Council would probably come back and want to make some changes there. Missy?
Good afternoon. We will want to share the screen so you can see the presentation. It has also been sent to you via email, so if you are able to follow along with that information, that would be most helpful. But as Ms. Wilson mentioned, we're proposing today the 2020-2021 budget, and we will basically today our goal is to highlight each fund and our plans for the budget going forward in the midst of our financial uncertainty. Where we're focused on the most with regards to budgeting going forward, regardless of whether, regardless of our funds, and keeping focused on those things that we plan to continue our operations, maintaining operations, continuing to provide excellent day-to-day service in our community, and fulfilling the city's financial obligations, both our debt service payments and, of course, our other financial commitments. We want to first start out with talking about what our financial impacts are with COVID-19 and how it impacts the specific revenue. There's specific revenue streams that are impacted more so than others. Of course, with the city as well as our colleagues across the state and across the country, we have limited information that we would generally use to make our revenue forecasting, both in terms of unknowing the full impacts that we will see on our revenue streams, but also delays in certain payments that would normally be due or have been due by now, that would have also given us some indications as to what we would be using for making our forecast. Of course, the revenues that we think will have the most impact are those that are based on economic drivers. In other words, customer-driven type of revenue streams. Business licenses being one of them, general fund, and we'll talk about those a little bit further. Of course, we do not know, we do not have a crystal ball in terms of the impact of COVID-19 in terms of how severe the impacts could be or not be. And of course, how long everything will be impacted, but we do anticipate impacts on our budgets for at least the next 2 foreseeable fiscal years. So the areas that we think we will see the most impact in terms of general fund would be our business licenses. the revenues coming in this year and the budget that we're in this year are based on prior year activities. So we're not really seeing an impact on those other than the delay of those revenues coming in. Since we did offer a delayed submission of your 2020 business licenses. Right now, our general fund business licenses make up 20% of our general fund revenue streams. Other fees, other revenue streams at a smaller amount but still impacted would be some of our user fees. That would be, in particular, our parks and recreation fees that we generate there, as also some special events. We are also forecasting a reduction in our transfer from, or proposing a reduction in our transfer from hospitality tax, and then some other revenue streams that could potentially impact that we expect would be court funds. While we don't anticipate revenues from property taxes to be impacted directly, we do think that could be some impacts on our lost revenues in terms of the credit back to our property tax payers, as well as collections in terms of when collections come in, and we think there could be some slowness of payments, and certainly as we see personal property tax revenue. Parking fund, as we know, our street meters are definitely right now, we're not collecting on parking meters, so we do see anticipated reduction in street parking meters. As events are canceled or postponed, we do anticipate reductions in our event parking, and then also 2 parking garages potentially could be impacted as well. Special revenue is where we certainly expect some significant impacts, both with hospitality tax and in particular accommodations tax, as we see decreases in occupancy rates of hotels for now and in the foreseeable future, those being some of those significantly impacted. Water, sewer, and stormwater, while we do not see as much of an impact in terms of our regular collections, there could be some impact as regards to ability to pay. And of course, we're not proposing any rate increases going forward, as we'll talk through going forward. So I covered this area just to sort of impact as to what was the nature around where we are making our revenue projections. In particular, the 3 funds that we mentioned here, our general fund, parking fund, and special revenue. As we impact those revenues, that also has impacts on our budgets, because our budgets are shaped by what we project in our revenue streams in order to have a balanced budget. So we do anticipate that as we have reduced revenues, we will have reduced operating budgets that will correlate to that as well. So we'll talk a little bit about general fund. I'm graphically just demonstrating a little bit, even though it doesn't look significant here on the graph. And the general fund proposed budget compared to, and actually that, I'm sorry, the FY 1920 budget, the amended budget that we're in current year, is the dark blue. Next to that is the projections for our proposed FY 2021. What we've done for our proposed 2021 budget is we've used our FY 18-19 actuals as our recommended budget for going to at least start this coming fiscal year. We do anticipate amending the budget later in the year. So as we compare current year budget to proposed for next year, that's about a $24 million reduction. That's in both revenues and transfers in. One of the most significant transfers in that's not being reflected here that makes it part of that $24 million is the $9 million that we received from the capital lease program. So if we anticipate not issuing a capital lease next year, that's $9 million that's not reflected in revenues, but there will also not be a reflection in the expenditure side as well. So that makes that part of that $24 million in the proposed FY 2021 for actuals. But you can see in terms of our licenses and permits, again, it may not look graphically significant, but any reduction that we have in our revenues certainly could be impacted in terms of our operations of our budget. Just again, talking a little bit more, our proposed budget at this point for FY 2021 for general fund is $138 million. It's about a 14.5% reduction based on the current year amended budget. If you recall, we amended our budget in September to reflect increases for the hydrant fee rates. As we move forward and throughout the year, and as we get additional information, we do anticipate amending the budget later in the year. We do anticipate that as we prepare for passing of this budget and preparing for the amendments, we will evaluate programs and other priorities, working with our departments to amend those budgets. Of course, our main goal is to continue to maintain existing service levels where possible, but recognizing that some of our programs may have to be suspended or no new programs started. Of most significance, we want to make sure that we do point out that we will continue our public safety recruitment and retention efforts, and that shot spotter services are retained in the proposed budget. I mentioned that to say that even though we are proposing the FY 18-19 actuals, we will have to work with our departments here in the next couple of weeks to actually revise the budget. So the budget that's presented for you today is not reflective of the department's request, and nor does it reflect an actual allocation for each of our departments. Again, this budget is a balanced budget that allows us to meet our requirements for passing a budget by June 30th. Going forward with our water and sewer fund, we do anticipate bringing you more or additional information regarding our water and sewer fund in terms of higher detail information about the Clean Water 2020 updates, as well as other Columbia Water programs and activities that are continuing on in the coming weeks. The proposed budget at this point is $168 million, which is 2.2 or 1.3% from current decrease of the current year amended budget. We did amend the budget just a couple of weeks ago for the increase the transfer from water and sewer, and that was used with fund balance. So otherwise, the budget the net of that is a decrease from the amended budget. So it's just important to point out as you look at the proposed budget summary, that's what makes up that decrease. However, we are forecasting no rate increase for the coming year. We do anticipate in passing, including the budget does include a $40 million capital improvement program. While that's reduced from current years, we do anticipate that it will meet the deliverables of the EPA consent decree with an adjusted time frame. The $40 million capital improvement program reflects $15 million from water and $25 million for wastewater. The department's budgets are proposed at $99 million or $100 million. They make up about 50% of the operating budget. These budgets are reflective of what the department submitted, so there is a little bit more information about those budgets on the budget summaries that you have before you. Of importance to note out, with our water and sewer funds, we're continuing to utilize more technology to deliver our services. This obviously, in this current mode that we are operating in, has allowed us to continue our services, to be able to operate and interact with our customers more remotely. We are seeing the advantages of that more so now in our current arrangement, which has been a big benefit both to the city and to our customers. The budget does reflect continuation of the AMI project, and as we mentioned, we'll be doing more online opportunities to interact with customers and providing information to our customers through using technology. And debt services reflected at $41.9 million, which is about 25% of the operating budget. The capital improvement program for water is, as I mentioned, $15 million. About 43%, the largest portion of that budget is reflected for our water plant improvements. and then also water quality, and then some utility relocation. The wastewater budget is $25 million, of course, it being the larger of the two capital improvement programs out of our system, with 35% being rehab and 34% for other, which are reflects our program management and our and some unforeseen projects just as we go throughout the year, which is often anticipated. And then, of course, capacity improvement projects as well, and utility relocation at 12%. Moving on with our stormwater fund, our stormwater budget is proposed at $14 million. We are not recommending a rate increase, which would have been part of the 5-year capital rate increase that was initially proposed. We do think we can support that budget this year without the rate increase for this year and still be able to continue our capital improvement program. The budget does reflect a $20 million capital improvement program for next year going forward. And then the other major expense of our stormwater budget, 23% is engineering. Public Works makes up 30% in terms of operating costs. Public Works is inclusive of those services that are provide city support and maintenance of our stormwater system. And of course, engineering will reflect those engineering design programs that we use going forward for our capital improvements. The capital improvement program, again, for the stormwater program for next year is proposed at $20.1 million. Parking fund, as mentioned, is also expected to see some of the most significant impacts of COVID-19 revenue on our revenue streams for the parking fund. So this budget is again reflective of FY 18-19 actuals. We have made some adjustments to revenues already based on what we're seeing with our current revenue collections for parking. So the budget is proposed at $7.7 million. It is a decrease of about 3%. Revenues again impacted by business disruptions. The majority of our revenues come from our parking garages. However, 37% do come from street meters. So that also has an equal effect on our operating expenses. At this point, the department budgets just reflect 18-19 actuals, and is not reflective of what's requested or proposed originally proposed for the next fiscal year. And we will work with departments in the parking fund to amend their budgets for next year. Debt service makes up $2.7 million of the parking fund, which is about 35% of the total budget. Hospitality tax, as mentioned, this is one of our, we anticipate one of the most significantly impacted areas. The proposed budget is $7 million, which is a reduction of $4.1 million, or almost 37% compared to the current year budget. That's a pretty significant impact on this budget. Of course, we do not have a crystal ball to know the full impacts. We do anticipate making amendments later in the year as we go forward, as we monitor with the hospitality industry and seeing how collections come in over the next few months. The hospitality tax budget reflects a debt service of $3 million. We have reflected a reduction in the transfer from the general fund of $925,000, and sustaining that into the coming fiscal year. This leaves us with about $1.3 million for allocation. And we'll work with City Council on making adjustments as we proceed going forward for external allocations from the hospitality tax fund. Next, we have the accommodation tax budget. It again is also significantly impacted. We do reflect a reduction of, the proposed budget is $1.4 million. That's a reduction of 1.2, almost 46% reduction from the current year. Obviously, accommodation tax being revenues from our hotel occupancy. And so as we anticipate there being significant reductions in the hotel occupancy rates, we also reflecting reductions in those collections. Again, for both hospitality and accommodations tax, we'll continue to monitor and are prepared to amend the budget later in the coming months. Accordingly, hopefully, while we are optimistic that we will be able to make some positive adjustments, we had to be prepared to make additional reductions, or at least continue with what's being proposed. Our goal at this point is proposing a budget that is reflective and realistic, so that we can manage expectations about allocations, especially as external groups that rely on these funding streams for operations. The budget that's before you now is based on the state law allocation of accommodation tax. The first allocation being the reflection of the transfer to the general fund. So it's stated here again, to continue to transfer to the general fund. We do allocate about 5% of that remaining amount for general purposes or general fund type of activities. There's typically been two groups that have received those funds, one being One Columbia and the other one being Together We Can Read. And then the committee allocations has typically been allocated for our Experience Columbia and Murray Country organization. As we wrap up this conversation and prepare for discussions with council, we wanted to point out that we are proposing that since we are ready to move forward with the budget as presented today, if City Council so desires, we will advertise the budget after this meeting in the coming Monday paper. So today will be the last meeting before we advertise. If City Council chooses to go back to the schedule of the original schedule, which means we would have our public hearing and first reading on June the 2nd, and then second reading on June 16th, which would eliminate the need for any special called meetings in June in order to pass the budget by June 16th. I mean, by June 30th. Just to accentuate, we do think we will have to continue reviewing and revising our budget as we go on in the coming months, and we'll open up for any questions that you may have.
All right. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. I'm going to ask everyone as we chime in and ask questions of Missy and Teresa and the staff. Let's try to do our best to keep it tight, because my sense is this is the type of thing that keep us here all night long. A couple of questions, quick ones, Teresa. Obviously, first of all, very good job, y'all. Very, very good job. I know we're obviously operating under the traditional frame. I know there've been some communiques and requests, not necessarily from us, but from the Municipal Association and others. And some recommendations even accelerate SC as to extend the fiscal year. They give us a little more time to meet our constitutional statutory responsibilities to laying out a budget. So we need on that, and more importantly, as we look at the proposed distribution of the hospitality tax in this budget, have we had involved conversations with any of the recipients around these? And these obviously are significant cuts reflective of the gravity of the situation before us. But have we had conversations with some of the organizations that look at having the steepest cuts? And obviously, we're looking at also a significant recommended reduction to the committee as well. Have we dialogue with the Citizens Committee at all?
The committee, yes, sir, through the committee chair, and then the letter you all had us to draft. They, received that. Some of the past recipients, not the line item agencies, though, Mayor. We haven't had any conversations with them. Missy often talks with folks as they call, but I have not. Missy, have you?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. We have spoken some to the Hospitality Tax Committee.
Right.
Mostly, and asked for some input on their thoughts on, and many of them being restaurateurs, their thoughts on how we see collections. We haven't heard back from them at this point on that. They have been communicated that the committee allocations at this point are suspended until we know a little bit more information to provide with them. I think they were also asking for some time to be able to focus on their own operations. But that's been a little over a month from them. But we have not had any more recent conversations than that.
And a lot of those allocations, Missy, correct me if I'm wrong, and council would know this too, that are, reimbursable based off events. So the assumption would be that several of these events would not be occurring. But I mean, that's an assumption. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but
that's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. The hospitality grants are reimbursable. So typically what would happen is if an organization is going to have an event, they would submit us receipts for expenditures in accordance to not just the city's guidelines, but also to make sure that they are in compliance with state law, and we would reimburse them. We have not heard back from many of the organizations yet to know whether they will continue to have their events, but we'll work with we can work through the applications to see which ones are still anticipating to move forward, or those that may have been canceled altogether.
Yeah. Mr. Duval.
Mr. Mayor, I've had some long thoughts about the allocations of the hospitality tax and the way that we could make sure that we are strategic with our distribution this year to continue to find organizations that use the hospitality tax as a major part of their funding source. We have to realize that it's going to be a big hit on a lot of these organizations. And I think it's up to the council to make wise choices as to which organizations get the ability from the hospitality tax to help the other organizations during this period of maybe a year or two. I have sent to the council some proposals on the allocations, but I believe, Mayor, you want to carry that over to our next meeting so that we can talk to some of the hospitality agencies.
Yeah, that was my initial reaction. However, I appreciate you taking a swipe at this, and obviously this is going to be a very difficult year. Some events may not be happening, some may. Obviously, I feel that there needs to be a great amount of dialogue with our organizations that provide the arts and cultural infrastructure of the city, and that short of that we be moving with haste. I'm not comfortable with this, and obviously we have to make sure we take care of the critical infrastructure that the city provides. But I want to take a look at the transfer to general fund. I want to take a look at what's remained to be allocated, and just dig a little bit deeper. I think we owe the public a bit more due diligence. That's separate and apart from the tough decisions that staff has to make and recommend. Obviously, we have our responsibility as policymakers to come back and say, let's take a deeper look. I'd also recommend, we had some trips we were working on, Teresa, along with Misty and Ryan and others, to go and spend some time with some philanthropic organizations that we hope would be willing to invest in Columbia in some creative ways. And we might need to accelerate those in the Zoom calls very soon and see if this overall investment in arts and cultural infrastructure might be timely to really start looking at other ways to also help support that infrastructure. But yeah, we got to dig a little deeper into this, Robert. I don't feel comfortable. I think some of these cuts would not only be difficult, but maybe debilitating and unrecoverable for some of our organizations. And I want to make sure we're involved in a much more deliberate conversation.
Well, I look forward to your copy of how you would have the allocations.
I will do my best. I've been able to master Microsoft Word a little bit better at home, Howard. So I'll send you back a document with a bunch of red on it, okay? A bunch of red.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Mr. Duvall.
But let me say this again, Teresa. Howard, thanks for taking a swipe at it. I mean, I think it's really important that we have some really serious conversations, and I appreciate you taking this leadership.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same to both of you and all of council. And I think I said this in my opening comments. We really don't take a lot of liberties with this particular fund as it comes, other than remind you about debt service and that sort of thing. But I wouldn't want the public to think that we were picking and choosing between organizations. We didn't do that. It was just an across the board kind of percentage cut based off a formula, and that's all that it was, because we knew you would come back and give some clarity and color and want to dig a little bit deeper. And we would expect you to do that. So thank you.
Can we have this discussion placed on the next agenda?
Yes.
We need to. I think we need to. Yeah, I think we need to. Mr. Davis? You're on mute, Sam. You're on mute, Sam.
Sam's on mute.
Yeah, I've gone through staff's recommendations, so forth and so on. I think that the two things you alluded to that I'm interested in having a discussion on. One, we know that we can't fund everybody. We say this every year. And where we do fall short, I think, too, it does make sense that we might look for some philanthropic partners to help fill the gap. And also pick up on the discussion we ended on last year about structurally taking a look at the hospitality structure, the pot, and how we look at the different organizations in terms of capacity and size. But that's the discussion for next week.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Ms. Devine?
Just a question. I know we really don't know what's going to happen with our revenue, but just Ms. Wilson, moving forward, or I guess looking at where we are, I guess, if our internal needs, particularly staffing and things like that, do you see any glaring areas where we're going to have to put some attention on as it relates to our staffing levels or anything in the next few months?
Not at this time, nothing glaring, Ms. Devine. I've been pretty public in my, again, position or philosophy about looking at programmatic things that certainly the type of entity we want to continue to do. Are there things that we may have to hold off on before I would get into reducing staffing and that sort of things? Yes. I mean, those would be the type of recommendations preferably we would come back with before we would start looking at staffing. We're looking at everything, but today and in the immediate future, no, ma'am. Okay. I'm not saying anything glaring. There are programs that I know mean a lot to many of you, and me too, like recycling, and not say we do away with recycling, but are there some different ways we can handle recycling? Or I won't start calling things out, but there are a lot of things we're looking at. Staffing is not high on my list.
Okay. And I figured that. I just wanted to make sure that said, because I know, as you see other cities are furloughing and different things, I mean, I think our priority certainly is to, our team and making sure that we have that strong. But with that said, and I appreciate Howard, you taking a swipe at hospitality. And I know we've got a lot more leeway with hospitality because there's only certain things that you can use that for. But we also have to look that there are other groups that aren't in that pot, but they're always also relying on us. And so we've said this in years past, but I think certainly this year more than ever, we've got to look internally as to what our internal needs are and the services that we provide to our citizens, because people don't think of governmental entities as being as vulnerable as some of those outside, but we've got lots of areas, as Missy has indicated, where we're going to see some hits, and that's going to affect our overall budget. So I want to make sure that we focus on when we're talking about strategic inside as well, and making sure that we're making the right choices as far as keeping what we do at the forefront.
Yes, ma'am. And you'll see a lot of your budget by fund shows each fund what the department head would have proposed and requested based off, moving the Envision Columbia priorities forward and various programmatic things. And you will see how we could not do really any of that and had to make some cuts. So all of that was done in an effort to continue to move us forward without having to address staffing. I hope we don't get to that point. I mean, I can never say never about anything, but to answer your question, that was not the approach that we've taken just yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rickenman?
Ms. Wilson, I know you're going through everything. When do you think you'll have a recommendation list or ideas for us to discuss? Because I know programmatic also something, unfortunately, has to deal with people and positions as well. So I know you're pushing your effort to look at things, but I'm just curious when you thought you might have an inside look you could share with us to discuss kind of how you see moving forward. Because, I mean, 24 million would be great. I think some of the numbers have floated here and there. It could be worse, it could be less. We just don't know at this point, but I think that's a good target number. I'm just curious when we could kind of dive deep into that.
Sure. I mean, we have a short list now, Mr. Rickenman. We didn't, I don't think that's shown on any of your documents that we gave you. But we were trying to approach it as if we come back to amend the budget, these would be some of the things that we would be looking at. And so, I mean, we can show you that next time on May 19th.
I think that'd be great.
Let me also make sure that we've been tracking the stuff with the fiscal pain tracker, not tractor, at the U.S. Council of Mayors, and I want to make sure they have the up-to-date information. I know Taylor, thanks for working with staff. Let's make sure we update it as well as possible. We're seeing some incredible. We're in, I know things are difficult, y'all, but we're in much better case than a lot of other communities who are structured in different ways. The shutdowns have affected their budgets in some devastating ways. But thank you. Any other questions of staff? All right.
Really appreciate your support and always being flexible to give us the leeway to try to put these things together. Never have approached a budget like this before. I know that it's very different for Missy as well. So and Jeff, but we're working through it.
So I know obviously you wanted to have a conversation, just knowing the way your MO, Teresa, with staff and then count before the public. But whether it's been solicited directly or not, we're about to get a whole lot of input from the public after this meeting. So let's see how we can curate those discussions in a way that might be illuminating for us. Obviously, different events. I mean, every event that may bring in revenue also has expenses, and some bring no revenue. So are there ways in which these partners that rely on the H tags or A tags might be able to look at your recommended numbers, at staff recommended numbers, and find a way to back into those numbers or somewhere. I think just start that conversation, and obviously, you'll probably get more no's than you will yeses, but I think we'll at least be able to take into account that input in a much more educated fashion from our partners going forward, and we'll see who's helpful, who's not, and be able to make some judgment calls. Mr. Davis.
Just to close, I've honestly looked at staff's recommendations, and I'm impressed with their approach and how they've taken a look at the anticipated impact of what's going on now. And when you take a look at water and sewer and other capital projects, I would say that we are in good shape with those. I think the impact could have been worse, but at the same time, there's still revenue that's going to come in, and I think those are the kinds of areas in staff's craftsmanship that's going to keep us in the game moving forward. But it's not easy. When I, for example, just think about rolling stock and technology. We've got to keep, for example, law enforcement and the first responders moving, regardless of other distractions. And we've got to be able to use technology to our advantage so that we become a lot stronger and a lot smarter moving forward. So I'll give staffs some high points for their approach on this. What they're, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. No, we look forward to it. Thanks, Cowboy.
So we'll proceed with advertising the budget for next Monday, which means we'll shoot for a June 2nd public hearing and first reading.
And we'll take leave to make amendments to the internal budget as we need to.
All right. Mr. Mayor, we'll try to have some feedback as you've requested regarding the HTAX groups. Best you can. I know you all have some conversations as well, and if you get any feedback, which I'm sure you will, please share them with me and Jeff and Missy. And then we'll also focus on no water and sewer increases that we've already laid out today. However, Robert Chambers with Black and Beach will be available to just kind of give you some projections. He's aware of what we're doing and why, as many other communities they work with across the country. He'll be available on May 19th. And we will have the programmatic changes that we could potentially see going forward, as Mr. Rickman requested, and get some feedback from you if we're working towards any amendments in the future.
And per your request, Howard, I'll reach out to you directly. We'll talk, dig a little deeper into things. Okay. Hey, Jameson, a little deeper. And I just want us to keep in mind too that of the different HTAC recipient organizations, that many of them are doing what we try to do, maintain obligations to our staff, our team, have not had ongoing revenue from events that they may have had programmed over the spring, but they still had the major financial liabilities. So we'll work through it. I mean, we always work through it together.
We
so
did.
We'll dig a little deeper and figure out how we can approach this the right way.
I did want to see if Jeff had anything to add, Mayor, if that's okay.
Oh, he popped up and popped away.
Yeah, you did.
Sure.
Hey,
I would like to add just one thing, and Missy Kaufman has mentioned this in the past. We will be reviewing, as we start to get actuals that come in, we'll be reviewing the forecast. I think one of the areas that will have the greatest effect will be hospitality tax. The numbers that Missy Kaufman presented to y'all today, it is a pretty large decrease from prior years, but as the economy comes back, depending on how the activities are going this summer, that can have quite an effect. If you go back to a decade ago when we had some budget issues, I think we came back later on in the year when we recognized there were additional revenues to add to that. So we, it's something to think about, especially on hospitality tax, what we may not be funding today, depending on how everything comes back economy wise, we may be re-looking at that just in 4 to 5 months from now.
Absolutely.
And with parking too, Jeff, but we'll be talking to council a little bit later today about some, as the economy is opening back up downtown, and a soft way to move back into some enforcement. And we've got Missy and those have a plan for that, but obviously that's another fund that's taking a hit. Hopefully we'll know more about that as well in the weeks to come.
Super. That was detailed. Look forward to a whole lot more combos on that. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Okay. No other questions, Mayor?
No, ma'am. Didn't we have another? No, ma'am. Didn't we have something else that we held for Tamika? Item 11.
Item 11.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Item 11 is resolution number R 2020-056, urging the United States Congress to implement an emergency rental assistance program for citizens impacted by COVID-19.
And I'll just preface, I'll move. This was a request from the trade organization of apartment complexes. We recognize that there are a lot of folks who are affected by COVID-19, but they're also, we want to make sure that people don't take advantage of programs that are put in place to help those who are struggling. So this is just a resolution for us to ask Congress to make sure there are parameters behind the assistance that may get passed. So I so move.
Second.
Move second. Discussion. All right. Move the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Aye.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mr. Vine,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin.
Aye. All right.
Benjamin, certainly can.
Ms. Wilson.
I'm sorry.
I think Mr. McDowell.
Can I back up for just a moment? Referencing parking and how that has really abated itself during this pandemic. I got a concern from a person who called to say that they rented spaces in one of our parking lots. And of course, because that person is not working now, wanted to know whether or not, in order to keep that parking space available, do they continue to pay the parking assessment?
Well, yes, sir. We have been working with individuals on working with companies, but also individuals as they brought those things to our attention. So there was not a blanket, we didn't just suspend payments for those spaces, obviously, but we've been very, I think, generous and gracious about working with people. So we would just need to know who that is. If you could just.
Can I forward that email to you?
Yes, sir, of course.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Teresa prefers phone calls at 1 a.m. Call at 1 a.m. and
comes with the job.
I got some of those calls to Ed, and we set them staff.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Backtracking on last week, we dealt with the question of curfew. And I know we collectively, we agreed that we would maintain what we have in place. It's my understanding that there was more than one area or one group that was asking for the curfew. I know I dealt with an area where I think the one you received originated. Do we need to, or do we want to put something out in terms of a statement? I know everybody knows where we are now. We're maintaining our position. The governor does, but I think for the area or the group of folks that have communicated that to us, we may want to at least say something or send them something regarding our position.
Yes, sir. My understanding, and I don't want to speak for Chief Holbrook, but as he and I talked through those specific areas,
Right.
I think you're referencing, Mr. Davis, the areas that wanted the curfew actually moved up as far as the start time, because there were some others who were interested in it being, not as late. So we got multiple things going on with the curfew.
Right.
But Chief Holbrook was going to work with those neighborhood leaders to explain the position and the additional things that CPD was going to continue to do to address some of the concerns they were having versus assuming the solution of raising the hour for the curfew would have been, helping them understand why that wasn't necessarily the best solution.
Exactly. That was my position and my communication to them, but we just made it official last week.
I'm not sure if Chief is online, but I'll double back around with him.
Okay.
Yeah,
I am, Ms. Wilson.
Okay.
Chief, can we do that that area that originated, the one that we got in writing?
Yes, sir. You mean as far as explaining the?
Yeah. Can you and I kind of just talk with the leadership there, since they've really put some time into that, and there is some movement and a groundswell of everybody getting involved and helping to make a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'll get with you offline about how to do that. Okay.
Yeah. That's good.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let's harness that energy for good. Indeed. Thank you. All right. I think we're done. Teresa, we have any city council committee reports or referrals?
Okay, you ready?
All right. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Yes, sir. One constituent left a voicemail that we would like to play into the record.
Please. Thank you.
Hey, this is Chris Goodman, a proud Columbia resident, and appreciate the opportunity to get to listen to the meeting online. Do more work, but I appreciate the opportunity to leave a comment. This is about the bike petition that we've been circulating. I live in Elmwood and I'm part of a team that's put this petition together. We see a real opportunity, in this time of reduced travel with COVID-19 to advance the walk bike plan that's been in place for 5 years. I know there's projects that have been considered, discussed over the years. We've watched as other neighboring cities like Charlotte and Greenville have, taken the time to do some simple demonstration projects. Our petition, I think many of you have seen, we've got over 1,200 signatures now, and just being out in the community, definitely hear a lot of positive responses to it. I think there's a real opportunity here, especially hearing the discussion you had about green spaces and sort of those safe ways that we can be outside. And this is also a safe way to start to think differently about public spaces in our community. Again, thanks for the time. I hope this is just part of an ongoing conversation that we'll have. I look forward to hearing your responses.
Well, thank you. Teresa, I know staff's been looking at some potential opportunities for some demonstration projects, and we also have some movement happening on a number of different fronts. Is that something that someone wants to speak to right now?
Well, just to affirm the gentleman's comments, I'm aware of the petition. I think Mr. Brennan and Ms. Devine in particular have taken some leadership and asking me and the staff to look at a demonstration project. We're reviewing the costs and the infrastructure as well as a location that should be having a follow-up meeting. We've had one meeting with Mr. Brennan and Mr. Vine, and should be having another meeting in maybe the next week or so to look at those recommendations. I wish we could do more right now, but at least one demonstration project will move forward, Mr. Mayor and Council. And we'll bring all of those recommendations to the full council, of course.
Okay, thank you. Let's make sure we communicate that back to Mr. Goodman. My sense is he's probably going to look for our comments online, and however we can loop him in. I'm not sure Mika, if you know him.
Well, I think our clerk probably has captured his contact information, Miss Hammond. Would be shocked if she did, because she is the master of this new platform, that's really good to see it at work, in action, hearing a citizen virtually. That's great.
The only problem is people can leave messages now. I don't know if I like that or not. So.
Well, I think it gets us as close as to what we've been trying to do, as far as if, they can't be present with them, but we heard them. We heard you, Mr.
That was very effective, actually. And make sure we also thank him, not just for the sentiment and the work, but also the tone of the message, which is give me a tad bit of concern as of late, but we'll talk about that another day. Ms. Devine.
Just one thing, I know the demonstration project is something a lot of folks have taken hold of and want us to do right now, but we have been continuing to work towards expanding the Greenway and doing some other things. To that point, Ms. Wilson, I think it was like the beginning of March when we really started all this and things got into lockdown. Ms. Gentry was working on getting I guess the documents to see how far we would be able to go with the Greenway with the money that Representative Rutherford was able to secure for us. And he actually just asked me last week, I think, as the state is also looking at, the needs during this pandemic, but also projects. He seemed to think that, green space and things is something that he could continue to move forward. So as we continue to look at that, if Ms. Gentry, I know y'all have been very busy with lots of things, but if we could get that information back to him as soon as possible, since he asked, I certainly want to move on that as soon as possible.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, we will.
All right. Good deal. Thank you. No more public comment, Madam Clerk. If not, then sorry.
That's it. We have 2 callers just listening still on the line, but that was the only message.
Okay, super. Thank you. So if no one else wants to share anything, we'll Mr. Duval, you got a motion for me?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, I move we go into executive session for receipt of legal advice related to matters covered by attorney-client privilege pursuant to 30-4-70A2, legal advice pertaining to COVID-19, Columbia Housing Authority, Development Corporation, shared micromobility, discussion of negotiations and proposed contractual arrangement pursuant to 30-4-70A2, water and sewer letter of credit SMBC, discussion of the employment of an employee pursuant to 30-4-70A1, municipal court.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing, we'll move to the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Aye.
Mr. McDowell? Mr. Duval?
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Devine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin? Thank you. Mayor Benjamin?
All right, thank you.